Anyway, so today I'm talking about unblocking your backlog multi-dimensional accessibility audit, log jams for short. We'll just call it log jams. And this story starts back one spring day when hundreds of Jira tickets suddenly showed up in my inbox. I was working, and then bing, 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 notifications were just showing up in my inbox, and I thought, surely this is a weird glitch. Somebody made a mistake. But oh no, I think I was really being assigned 313 tickets in Jira. So I summoned all my courage and I direct messaged the scrum master that I didn't like too much, but and I said, hey, there's been a mistake, obviously. And they replied, oh, I thought you knew already. Dun, 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 ominous music. You'll be working on these. Oh, there were other people along the way that were part of this thing, but most of it was kind of falling on my plate right then and there. And to be honest, this triggered my fight or flight response. The fight side of my brain was saying, hey, you're Dave Rupert, you helped you do a podcast, you helped start the accessibility project, you care about accessibility, this is a great way to impact millions of people on a daily basis, like you should do this, let's go. But the flight side of my brain was saying, this is a trap, this is terrible, they're only doing this because illegal, this is tedious work and no one actually cares about it in the whole organization, you need to get out. And the flight side of my brain wasn't exactly wrong. Some simple math told me 313 issues, I was working at about a 5 issues per sprint clip, like that, all those issues going through QA and everything, that 5 issues per sprint was kind of an average. So that kind of, I could do the math, and that was about 63 sprints. The next 63 sprints, I'd be working on accessibility issues. That is 2+ years of my life working on something that other people in the organization are actively undoing my work. They're actively subverting the accessibility work I'm doing. So I felt like I was here in a giant sea of logs stuck on a river, poking at each log with a stick, trying to figure out what had happened. We had created a log jam. I mean, I didn't. I write great code. There's no way I wrote an accessibility bug. Maybe, perhaps, I have shipped inaccessible code. Let's just pretend. So, but we had, as an organization, had created a logjam. So let's take a second, because I'm going to use this metaphor of a logjam. I think it applies very well, but let's just all understand logjams together. A long time ago, pre-industrial age, people realized you could take a log, chop it down upstream, and float it down the river. This is pretty great. Great invention to use a river. It's you don't need an ox and a cart. You don't need a truck. You just chop it down, roll it in the river, and then send it down the river, and somebody picks it up. Not too bad. Very green technology, except for the whole chopping down trees part. But it is pretty green technology. And this works. You can start sending stuff down the river once you've figured out how to do this. And they pass through just fine. The problem occurs when you send too much inventory down the river, and you send too many logs down the river. Like this river here I have is like, you see this constraint in the middle, right? There's the problem occurs in this constraint part, where if there's a rock in the river or a bend in the river, all the logs going into the river will bump up next to each other, get all cattywampus, and just jam up the river and lock. You could think of the bend in the river as a sudden change in direction. Wink, because that happens in our jobs. So you put too much inventory, too many logs in the river, and you suddenly have problems. In my brain, I started mapping this to this idea of the theory of constraints, which is a business term. But the idea is you have inventory, and through some operational expense, work, or when sawing in this case, or even time on the river is an operational expense. You turn that into throughput, and throughput is something you can sell and make money on. That's the theory of constraints. It was popularized in this book by Eli Goldratt called The Goal. And this book is a book, I would say, don't judge a book by its cover, because the cover is hideous. It's got a man on there in a bunch of blue, and it's just not a great cover. It's not a good book cover. And I would even say don't judge it by the narrative format inside the book, because it's written in narrative format. And for business books, that's just a terrible sort of foundation, like kind of this fake business story, like fictional business. But hey, it turns out to be a pretty good book. If this is not your cup of tea, I could recommend the graphic novel adaptation, which I own. It's the same book, but a graphic novel, so it's a little bit better. But then there's also this modern reinterpretation, reimagination called The Phoenix Project by Gene Kim. And it is a really good, it deals with IT and DevOps and bringing a company into the modern era. And it's really a cathartic read. And I would recommend this one as maybe the starting point, but just know it's kind of based on this old book. Going back to the theory of constraints, right? The idea is you need to, you have inventory, and it's important to acknowledge that inventory costs money. You had to pay for the field that the trees live in. You had to pay somebody to chop it down. You had to pay somebody to roll the log into the river, or probably bought a big, backhoe or something to grab the log and chuck it in the river. Inventory costs money. The operational expense obviously costs money. That's time on the river. Time is money. Somebody has to mill the boards, fetch the boards out of the water. And where the constraint is, the problem is when there's too much inventory, and then all of a sudden you can't create throughput. Now you are not creating money for your business, but you're spending money, but you're not creating money. In some ways, this reminds me of A Bug's Life, a bug that I work on. In nature, the bug exists on my website. And then the bug is discovered and chucked into the river and floated down the river. And then through some process, it's entered into that backlog, and the backlog then gets jammed up, of course. But the backlog then, there's a process where we turn the backlog work item into work that can be performed, and then hopefully the bug is fixed. But if we have too much inventory, too many issues in the backlog queue, we jam up the system. I know what you're thinking. Is this going to be the no backlogs thing I've heard about from David Hannemer Hansen over at 37 Signals? You're not wrong. No backlogs would be wonderful. I think there's something to be said about the economics that bugs are cheap to produce and expensive to fix, if that makes sense. Not even just if you think of like Axe, the dev tool, it can find 37 issues on your website in a second and a half. And that's very cheap to produce that bug, but going to take a little bit more money to fix it. You might say like, oh, should we just do no backlogs? And I'm going to say no, because I couldn't walk into my enterprise client and just delete their entire backlog, right? I had to undo the backlog jam. Like we didn't have the opportunity to just delete things. We had to fix things. So accepting that reality, how do you eat the proverbial elephant, right? Like you have a big problem and you have to finish it. That's sort of the thought question, the thought exercise here. And the conventional wisdom is one bite at a time. You just start at the nose and go to the tail, get it done. Like it's not going to be fun. You just do it. And I understand that perspective. However, my brain says, mm, find the most delicious and easiest to eat parts first. I know that sounds disgusting, but I've never eaten an elephant before. So, are there tastier pieces? Is there bacon in an elephant? I'm curious. I would like to know before I spend the next few 2 years of my life eating this elephant. So, before we get into this, I want to talk about accessibility audits, right? And understanding how audits are performed. I actually don't want to change the auditing process. The auditing process is grueling. It's difficult work. It's done screen by screen, button by button, requirement by requirement, browser by browser, platform by platform. In this talk, I'm going to reference an accessibility audit that found 90 issues on one page, and it tested 8 different assistive technologies. That's grueling work. This work is done by experts. I don't want to change that whatsoever, but I want to acknowledge some of the limitations in accessibility audits. They're often focused on the output and ignorant of what's on the input. And I mean this ignorant in the most docile sense of the word, the easiest sense of the word. Um, if accessibility audits will focus on the output, right? That's the thing the user reads or has read to them. That's the part they interact with. So that's the part accessibility audits should focus on. But the part I work on is the input. And if there was a one-to-one mapping between the input and the output, that would be easy. But that's not how I make websites. Oftentimes, I'm working on dozens of files to create one piece of output. It's a layer of abstraction, but I use that to build up a single page. And because of that, often accessibility audits tend to be very repetitive due to how we reuse our code. Because if you find a problem on one page, it'll show up on the next 4 pages because I coded it that way. I did that on purpose. So, and it's going to be easier to fix that way, hopefully. Another limitation of accessibility audits is they're often ignorant of the easy versus hard in the underlying system. For example, does anyone know the difference between these 2 pages? Anyone? Anyone? Well, one is on the production database. It's a high effort of change. Like there's user data, account data. So if I had to add an alt attribute to an image field in the CMS, that's a big change. And it's going to go through multiple rounds of Q&A. Or QA, not Q&A, QA. And then the static site, the other page is just a static site. It's going to take a minute and a half to fix and it'll be done. It's very low effort. But another limitation is they're often ignorant of the metrics and relative importances of the page. For example, these 2 pages. Does anyone know the difference? Anyone? Anyone? Well, one gets 1 million views a day. It's a very high impact page. The other gets 5,000 views a day. It's a very low impact page. If I change things on the high impact page, everyone gets concerned. But if I change things on the low impact page, no one cares. It just goes through. So I have commit access. I can just change it. It's very important to recognize that. One example we had was 2 issues for alt text is missing. Do you know the difference? They were ranked the same priority. Does anyone know the difference? Well, one's on the production database, like I said, millions of views. It takes weeks to fix this issue. And the other is on the static site. It only has 5,000 views, but it takes minutes to fix this issue. And actually, we had a situation where we were able to fix like hundreds of static site issues before we were able to fix like one production database issue. So all that to say, like accessibility audits are great. I don't want to change them, but there are just a couple limitations in how they can digest our website. So how do you eat the proverbial elephant? Well, we were having digestive issues and the woolly mammoth was chasing us through the woods. We were not having a good time. There were so many issues in trying to figure out how they were related. And the offshore team that did the accessibility audit, they were very thorough but they ranked things with high, medium, and low priority. But they did not tell us how they ranked those things. We had no context for how they were sorted or prioritized. That was kind of unclear to us, and it made our job more difficult. So I thought I went on a search to find like who has done this before. And there's a great post by Steve Klabnik who called How to Be an Open Source Gardener. And in 2012, Steve was working on the Ruby on Rails project. He works with Rust, the Rust project now, but Ruby on Rails. And Ruby on Rails was had 800 issues in their backlog. And they were getting 20 or 25 new issues every single day. So Steve said, I'm going to get involved. And what did he do? Did he start triaging issues? Did he start assigning issues? No. He read through all 800 issues. He started at the top and opened each one in a new tab and read every single issue for 2 days. He read those issues. From there, Steve kind of got a good look at the problems Rails was facing and sort of understood like, oh, okay, this is similar to that. So what did he do next? Did he assign issues? No, he read through them again. But this time he did start assigning issues. But without the context of the first read through, he wouldn't have seen the duplicate issues or kind of the different types of issues. And he broke it down to 6 different types of issues. One, a feature request. Well, that's handled on the mailing list. Let's do that on the mailing list. Request for help. That's on Stack Overflow. We do that on Stack Overflow. Older versions of Rails. Okay, well, maybe the new version fixes it, but can we reproduce? Are there reproduction steps? If there are reproduction steps, then yes, we can actually work on it, but can we reproduce it against the latest version of Rails? If we can't reproduce it, if we can't reproduce it against the latest version of Rails, maybe we fix it already. So hurrah, we don't have to do work. But if we can reproduce it, well, then we can assign it to the relevant person in charge of that part of Ruby on Rails. I thought this was a great sort of way to tackle the problem of the elephant. So that's what I did. I read through all 313 issues and I started seeing some similar problems in our list of issues, lots of repetition. And there were even issues for pages that didn't exist anymore on the website. How I got a bug for a page that doesn't exist, I will never know, but it just happened. And that was jamming up my backlog. So we found out real quickly we were hitting the limitations of Jira, an enterprise bug tracking software. Jira has its primary view is a Kanban board, which is like, you move cards over from left to right as you progress through fixing them. But having 300 issues in a to-do column doesn't help us. And you could change the view a bit, but you still get a list of issues. All I would see was the title. I did not have enough information to make an educated decision about the issue. And you click into the issue, and then suddenly I got too much information. I was getting, every comment about the issue ever, the person who created it, there was too much information. I needed a Goldilocks sort of middle ground where I could show just the amount of information I needed. And maybe you can do this with your Jira skills, but I couldn't figure it out, or I didn't have access. It was easier for us to triage this in Excel. We exported all the issues into a spreadsheet and we went through it. There's 5 rows on this table, but there's project 1, 2, 3 is missing an alt attribute on the page, and that's a high priority. Okay. Project 1, 2, 4, focus not visible on hamburger menu. That's a high priority menu. Okay. Project 1, 2, 5, the page is missing alt attribute. That's a medium priority. Project 1, 2, 6, missing 3-to-1 contrast on search. That's a low priority. Okay. Project 1, 2, 7, focus not visible on checkout. That's a medium priority. Okay. The checkout page is interesting because I know that's a important page. So I started thinking, like, wouldn't it be great if we knew what pages were affected? If we had a little more data and we knew what page was affected, we could maybe make more educated decisions. Like the missing alt attribute was on the alt about page. That's a low traffic page, but it's a high priority. That's curious. Maybe our priorities aren't correct. Focus not visible on hamburger menu. That's every page of the website. So that would be a big fix if we could land that. Page is missing alt attribute. Well, that's on the features page, and that's a database fix. So that's going to be pretty involved. Missing contrast on search. That's every page is affected by that. And focus not visible on checkout. That's the checkout page. That's a very critical page for the whole business. And everyone gets upset if I change that page. So that's a hard fix right there. But back to, I don't look at pages. I work on components. So if I knew which component was affected, that would help me. The alt attribute is an image. Okay. The focus not visible in the hamburger, that's my header component. The page is missing alt attribute. That's an image component. The 3-to-1 contrast on search, that's header, but it's also form related. And focus not visible on checkout, that's also form related. Okay, but wouldn't it be nice? I know the page and the component, but wouldn't it be nice to know which WCAG violation? Oops, sorry, WCAG success criteria, because violation is a bad word and success criteria is a yay positive word. So anyway, but if I knew the WCAG issue, I could kind of understand it a little bit better or group them up more. And in fact, my brain is already making associations. I think, humans were designed to group things together and make sense of things. So new dimensions kind of start to appear. If I added a count to each column, well, in the ID column, the number of issues, I had 5 issues. But in the pages, well, it's only across 4 pages. In the component, well, it's only across 3 components. In the violation, the success criteria, well, it's only 3 issues. So all of those numbers, 4 is better than 5, 3 is better than 5, and 3 is better than 5. It's really helpful to kind of break issues down like this because I'm only having 3 problems across 3 components across 4 pages. That's easy. That sounds easier to fix in my brain. But we can only visualize one dimension at a time in Excel. I know Excel has pivot tables, but they're not great. But we could really only visualize one dimension at a time. So I started wondering, could we leverage these modern spreadsheeting applications? And I know modern spreadsheeting sounds like an oxymoron, but there's a few tools out there. Like Notion is one I use and really like. Airtable is another great tool. Full disclosure, they're a previous client at one point. Coda.io is another tool I was introduced to. And what's cool about Coda is it can hook into your Jira. It has an integration into Jira itself. So it's actually a really good tool for that, for this. But I'm going to show you how I did things in Notion. Maybe we could experience multiple dimensions at once. We don't just have to look at a spreadsheet. We could customize the dimension and then view it from different angles. So I'm going to walk through how to create your own multi-dimensional accessibility audit. And for the purposes of this talk here, I'm going to actually use an audit performed by Tenon on behalf of WP Campus, but it's an audit of the Gutenberg editor in WordPress. There was a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt about the editing experience in WordPress, and Tenon came through and just said, here's what's happening. Here are the problems with the Gutenberg editor. I thought this was an amazing project. I think it's beautiful that they open sourced it and made it open for everybody. Kudos to Tenon for doing an amazing job, but it's also really good because my client, the legal department, wouldn't let me share the audit, but it's also good because Not everyone would share their audits, share their problems like this. But Tenon also did a great job and broke it down component by component, which we'll use in our kind of visualizations here. So step one was to import the data, right? They provided a spreadsheet with all the issues, an executive summary, and another summary. But we just want to look at the spreadsheet. This is about as fun as looking at a spreadsheet. It is not a great experience. I'm sorry. So let's import it into Notion. And already I am 30% more calm. This is great. But I can see a lot of repetition, like all the project keys just says gut, 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 gut. We don't need that. Let's get rid of some columns. Step two, hiding columns. This is a feature of modern spreadsheeting applications. We can go through and click the title or the header row and just hide each row, or we can do bulk hiding. Like let's go through and hide the project name. Let's go hide the issue key because we don't need that. Let's go hide I'm looking for it, like recommended code samples or any sort of text. We don't want to see a paragraph in a spreadsheet ever. That's just basic spreadsheeting 101. Never have a paragraph. I'm a little more calm already, but I see another bit of repetition in the issue types. I see warning, bug, warning, bug. We can maybe make that a little bit better. And then we can go convert the call. So we do a process of converting columns to selects and multi-selects. And these are another feature of modern spreadsheeting applications where repetitive data can be turned into a select input, essentially, or a multi-select input, which are error prone. But we all know that at an accessibility conference. But so I did that to the issue types, and then every component it was showing up in about 5 different rows, but I can just manually copy paste and kind of roll these all into one column of multiple values. It's not fun, but you put on some nice music and get some coffee. It's an afternoon. Next step, the fun part, color code. Because I'm fancy, I want things to look nice. So we'll go through and color code things however you want. Warnings aren't gray. Warnings should be yellow because of, I don't know, soccer. And bugs are red because of scary. I don't know. But maybe you want to use emoji instead of a bug or the word bug. Either way, your choice. I actually went through and I color coded the WCAG success criteria because, perceivable, operable, understandable, robust, the 1 dot 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 2 dot dot 3 dot dot 4 dot dot, those addresses, they all map to a type of issue. And I thought that was very helpful to color code them. Take this as far as you want to take this. Next, add counts. This is easy. You go to the bottom of the row and you just count them up. But what we'll see here is, it was 90 issues, but it was only across 16 different components. And then you get down to the WCAG success criteria, but it was only 25 or 26 different issues across 90 components. And again, 26 issues across 16 components. That's a much easier way to digest the problem. So now that we know that, let's start to visualize these different dimensions. And this is sort of the last big step. In these tools, you can kind of create a new view. And let's just look at the issues that affect the title block. We can create a list. We can add a filter to just show the component that matches title block. Easy enough. We have all of our issues. So let's add a new view. You can group by and make Kanban boards, but you group them by whatever component you want. And now I have a whole board that kind of shows the different components and the number of problems affecting each component a lot better than a spreadsheet would. So now I can see like the edit media component has 15 issues. That's a big deal. Let's also group by WCAG success criteria. because this is very helpful too. Oh, I made a mistake. I made it a table, but these tools are forgiving. I can make it a board or a calendar. That would be weird, but I can. But let's go by WCAG issue. And you can see I color coded them, but we start seeing like the problems we are struggling with. And if we want to add more data, we can just turn on more data, customize this view however we see fit. Another one we can do is group by platform. Like I was on Windows, so I didn't even have a Mac, but no one else had Windows. So, like these Windows high contrast issues, I love fixing those. Those are my favorite. I didn't have VoiceOver for Mac, so I couldn't fix those. That had to be somebody else. But this last one is my favorite. Group by population affected. Check this out. So you go in, you group by populations, and now you have a list and a number of who is impacted by your site. I love this. Does your business have a list of populations you are actively discriminating against? Probably not, but now you can. And that's something I think every business should have, is just this knowledge here. But then even as a developer, I know, blind issues tend to be screen reader problems, markup problems, simpler fixes. Low vision, that's contrast, might involve a designer. I'll have to think through that. Motor impairment, usually tap areas and things like that. But cognitively impaired issues, we have a lot of those. And usually that's we were too clever with the design problem. We put a button that changed something in the hero, and why did we do that? But we need to rethink the whole experience. And for me, Dave Rupert, cognitive impaired issues often are harder to fix because they kind of take more involvement. So that's good information to have. That's by and large the most affected population, but like now we know the problems. So wrapping up our multi-dimensional accessibility audit, we went from this to this. A way to visualize problems however we see fit and group issues by their likeness. We went from 38 columns in our spreadsheet to 10 columns, only seeing the things we needed to see. And how did it work out for us? Well, we were able to close about 142 of the 313 issues, 46%, in 2.5 months. With part-time capacity. That's way better than the 2 years I originally thought it was going to take. But if you look at these issues, and I apologize for the contrast on this graph, but the bulk of the issues we solved were actually no fixes whatsoever. 50 issues could not be reproduced. They just had to disappear. Other issues were contrast. That was easy. Like this pie chart going from the clockwise here, we had 50 issues with no repo, 19 issues of contrast, 15 issues were our promo code form. 15 issues, and we fixed the promo code form, and we solved about a good chunk of our issues. Another 15 issues where I made an SVG icon, and I had duplicate IDs. Whoops, I had 2 icons of the same, or included twice, and I fixed that. I won't go through all of these, but there was some pretty low-hanging fruit that we were able to get to and close out a big chunk of these issues relatively simply. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is some thoughts on improving workplace satisfaction, because this was not good for me. I will say there's a thing in the Agile Manifesto that says individuals and interactions over processes and tools. For me, backlogs carry an emotional weight. When I got the 313 emails, I literally thought about quitting my job. So what do you do? I think employees in our businesses are feeling that too. You have these systems, agiles or audits, whatever, these tools, processes and tools that impact people's lives. And we really need to think about that. Daniel Pink is an author on motivation, and he in one of his books, and he says there's three things people need to feel meaning in their life. That's autonomy, taking on things that interest you; mastery, the feeling of getting better; and purpose, doing something bigger than ourselves. And if you don't take out the autonomy, like you assign somebody 313 issues, that's not fun for them. If you take out the mastery, I guess in this situation, I would have gotten better at accessibility, but if I fixed 313 issues by myself. But the purpose, if I'm doing something, accessibility is good here because it is built in doing something for a bigger purpose. But if in the organizational context, people aren't going to care, that's a problem. So I know what you're thinking. No backlogs. Let's just do no backlogs. Get rid of the backlogs, never do an audit. No problems. We'll solve it there. Well, again, I don't think that's entirely practical. What I would say is let's get to no log jams first. And here I'm going to give 4 quick tips on how I think we can avoid some log jams. Okay. Tip 1, avoid extensive audits. Start with a few core templates first. And I know you're maybe a company that makes audits, extensive audits. That's okay. You can do that. But what you deliver, think about what you deliver. Because, like I said before, code repetition means errors are going to repeat. So if you start with the few core templates, we should be able to solve without overwhelming the backlog. We should solve a lot of issues on these core templates if the site is built in a way that there's high code reuse. Tip number 2 is going to be deliver issues in small packs of related issues. And for this, on the slide, I have an illustration of a guy in a backpack, like a Boy Scout wearing a backpack. And I am very intentional about this. Like literally deliver issues in something one human being could wear on their back, like that number of issues. Just a really, I guess, human scale of issues. Have you ever seen a person whose desktop has millions of icons scattered all about and you have a panic attack when you see it? Isn't it better if you have little folders of issues, like fix alt attributes, fix focus states, resize text, headers, contrast in the production database, and modals? Oh, modals. Sally worked on the modals, and these would be good for her because she has domain expertise in that area. We should hand it over to Sally if she wants them. I'm reminded of Legos. Does anyone have kids or play with Legos? When I was a kid, you would open the bag of Legos and millions of Legos would shoot all over the floor into the carpet and then get vacuumed up later. But nowadays, they are delivered in tiny packs inside the box. And these packs progressively lead you through the exercise of fixing or building the Lego. And that leads me to my next point. Gamify the experience, progressively increase the difficulty. And I do not mean badges and little lucky charms for doing accessibility tasks, although that might be good. What I mean is more like Mario. In Super Mario, the first world is relatively simple. You just push right and hold on tight, just run through the level. You're learning the mechanics of the game. World 2 introduces some new enemies and new challenges, and World 4 is the culmination of everything you had learned in the previous worlds. You build up the skills. And in this example, I have World 1 being fix alt attributes. That's a really, really simple fix, a gateway drug to accessibility. World 2, fix contrast. I put this in World 2 because you have to now involve a designer. You can't just fix the contrast. You have to have a designer say, like, I want this hex in as the borders or whatever, the types. World 4, fix focus state. This is another like designer and developer kind of working together task. So it gets a little more challenging when you deal with buttons and interactions. So deliver these in packs like this, maybe progressively difficult packs, and you can lead people along and get people in a place where they are solving more and more complex accessibility issues. Tip number 4 is to care about accessibility before legal shows up. There's no replacement for this. Like if you do this, you'll solve a lot of problems. And so anyway, that's it. I hope you can get closer to this no log jams. Let's all get there together. And a quick thanks to my coworker, Yan Wang, who helped me kind of, I guess, guinea pig some of these ideas. And my friend, Christopher Schmidt, who passed away last year, he worked at Nobility, and he kind of, he was always interested in what I was working on, but he gave me feedback on this talk as I was kind of building it out. So thank you, Christopher. Thank you, Jan. And thank you for listening. Follow me on Twitter at Davatron, DAVATRON 5000. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dave. I think we've got a couple minutes for questions.
Sure, yeah.
So I've got the Q&A in front of me here, and there's a couple I'd like to draw your attention to, if that's okay.
Okay, let's try. I'll try. I'll do my best.
All right. How long did it take for you to work your way through this elephant bacon?
Yeah, so truth be told, I was cycled off the project. So I don't know that it's all fixed yet, but yeah, I mean, I think like, I do know that it took like 2.5 months to get through half of it. And we were making pretty good progress. Not a lot of people understood this multi-dimensional approach, especially in an agile flow where you're just like, well, the issues are there. Let's go left to right, so I don't know the answer to that, like how this speeds it up, but I do know personally, like having the ability to kind of measure these out into little fixes produced a lot of effort, or made it a lot easier.
How did you handle new issues, right? I mean, a lot of folks that are presented with a legal need to do this, perhaps a big expensive audit, and be presented with this proverbial elephant. How do you shift, and at what point do you shift to being more proactive?
Yeah, no, this was hard. At the same time, like the other front end developers were like building out a new feature. And so they built the new feature, and then there was an accessibility audit performed on that. And surprise, like it had accessibility problems. I was not on that piece exactly. So, and then that caused another panic because now our accessibility burn chart didn't go down, it went up, and so that's a big problem. So to answer the question, I guess, like, new stuff's always going to come. But I think like in my ideal brain, it's you have the audit, but you're only putting pieces like into you're like putting these like challenges, world 1-1 into the backlog and say like, let's fix this. And you as a auditing company or something, or the auditor, you can say, hey, I have a lot of these things. I have a lot of issues for you, but here's what you can understand, sort of like the wise old karate master, sort of just that trope, just like, I'm going to make you paint the fence or wax on, wax off the car instead of learning karate right now. So that might be a good way to approach it.
Okay. Thanks. The previous in your presentation, you were showing sort of categorization of your issues. Someone is asking, was the population data provided by the audit, or did you create those segments based on the applicable WCAG criteria?
That was in the audit, the Tenon audit, and that was a beautiful piece of Tenon's work. So all credit to them. I think you could sort of abstract some of that from the perceivable, operable, understandable requirements, but some issues are both. Trying to think of like focus states that would impact low vision users and cognitive impaired users at the same time. So, that's there may be a rubric. I don't know if somebody wants to make that and open source that would be cool. I will use it. Or if DeQ wants to roll it into Axe DevTools, that would be cool too. But if you kind of had an idea of the population affected, I mean, that just changes everything. You're now kind of getting real people affected, you know?
Yeah. There are a few questions here really surrounding your relationship with testers or QA. Could you tell me about that relationship and the role they had in helping either build these packages or give you any direction?
Well, so our relationship was, it was an offshore team that did the audit. And so it was partly due to time zones, but I think just even organizationally, it was somewhat of a bomb drop on us, like sort of like, here, you have to fix these. I had no idea the audit was being performed. I had no idea when the audit was end. You know, ideally I could have said, oh no, only audit these 3 pages first, you know, like that would have helped solve a bunch of problems, you know, in the long run. So if we had had better communication with the auditing team, that would have been better. And again, the priority stuff was mixed. We tried to give feedback, but it was not clear. Like they heard the feedback, but then said, just do it this way. And that was, again, stripping autonomy, not helpful. But we did a lot of the issue packing ourselves through the spreadsheet. So we ended up doing that on our own.
Gotcha. So yeah, there's another related question to that too, saying how do you provide the level of knowledge around what's part of a template or a component with testers to help aid in that? But it sounds like you're saying that you had to take on a lot of that responsibility.
We had to do that. And so I think there's room for a role of somebody who knows about it enough about accessibility. I would call it the accessibility champion in the organization. Maybe you don't know everything, but you know enough and you can kind of spot things. You say, oh, this issue is maybe a contrast issue or something. Usually that was in the issue summary. So we could just say, oh, that's a contrast. So one big bucket, but then, 4 to 5 contrast, or 4 to 1 contrast, 4.5 to 1 contrast and 3 to 1 contrast are 2 different things entirely. So you have to know the difference there too.
Absolutely. All right. So there are a bunch of other questions that unfortunately won't have time to get to. We'll do our best to share those with Dave and try and follow up if we can. Dave, thank you so much for your time, and everyone for attending. Thank you as well.
Well, thank you all. And yeah, if you have questions, please reach out. I'd love to talk to anyone about this. And if you try this and it is successful or not successful for you, let me know as well. So.